So from the front end, we want to send requests to our newly added comments API route. And it's the new comments component where I want to start with this. Here we have the send comment handler. And in there, we get all that user input. And we then have some client-side validation, which we shouldn't trust, but which is still there. And we then call onAddComment on props, which should be a function, where we pass an object with email, name, and text. And onAddComment then in the end is a function here in the comments.js file, this addComment handler, which is passed as a function through the onAddComment prop on the new comment component. And here we then receive that comment data, which should be sent as a request. Now I actually do need to connect my send comment handler to the form. So here with onSubmit, I point at send comment handler to connect that. And then in comments.js, we want to send a request. So here again, we can use the fetch function for this. And the route now is /API/ and then it's comments because of that comments folder / and then this file, but of course with a concrete value for the event ID. Now that event ID is something which we get through props here in the comments component. It's in the end passed in by this page, by this event ID page, so this real page, not the API route, but this real page. There into comments, I pass in this event prop, which points at the ID of the event we're loading here. Hence, in the comments.js file, we get this event ID prop, and that is what we should add as a concrete value to the route here, to the path. Then it should be a post request. Hence, we add this second argument to configure the request and set the method to post and the body then to our data. And here I'll use JSON stringify to send my comment data, which is this data package we get from the new comment component, which contains email, name, and text. And here I'm using these property names, email, name, and text, and hence it's these property names which you should be looking for in your API route, email, name, and text, so that the data can be retrieved correctly, because I'm just forwarding that data with my HTTP request to the API route. Then I'll add these extra headers to clarify the content type I'm sending here, application JSON, and we should be good. Now we can again wait for a response and parse that. And then as a next step, thereafter, get back some data, which we, for example, console log, like this. With all that implemented, if we save everything and go back, if I try to submit this empty form, I get an error here, because I have some built-in client-side validation. If I disable this client-side validation, if I go to the new comments.js file and I comment out this code here, and I submit this, it is submitted, but now in the network tab, if we open that and submit this, we see that the request actually fails, it's red, and it has this 422 status code, which we do send back from the API route if our server-side validation fails. And that server-side validation, unlike the client-side application, can't be tricked. So it is good to add logic like this. Nonetheless, I'll bring back that client-side validation because, of course, for the user experience, it's better if we already validate the data and show an error before we even send a request. So with that back, let's now enter some valid data here. Let's enter an email address and a name and some text. This is my comment, and click submit. And now this succeeds. We have the 201 status code. And in the response, we see the message and this comment object with the dummy ID, which was created on the backend. we're also logging it in the console here. So this works, and if we have a look at the server-side log, so the terminal where we run npm run dev, we also see that object here. So that works, and we do send that data. Now, last but not least, before we then add some real logic talking to a database to our API route, let's also fetch comments in the comments.js file when we do show our comments. Now, for showing the comments, we have the toggle comments handler, and that is executed whenever this button here is clicked. And whenever we do show comments, I want to load the comments by sending a GET request to this comments API route. So I want to trigger this part of this handler function then. And to achieve this, we got various different ways. We could go into this toggle comments handler function, for example, and here we change the state, but this will not be processed instantly by React. It will be scheduled, and in the next line thereafter, the state will not be updated yet. So here we could check if show comments is true, which means the current state is show comments, then the button was clicked and this function executes again. So the goal is to hide them now. And therefore we could check if not show comments, which means the current state is that the comments are not shown, then this function executes, and the new state is that they will be shown. So now we should fetch data, and that's something we could do. Or alternatively, we use good old useEffect here, and also import that from React. And in here, simply add show comments as a dependency. And in the effect function, we then check if show comments is true, which means that comments are shown. And if that is true, we want to fetch the comments. So then here we can send our request to /API/comments/event ID. So this concrete event ID. We don't need to configure it because it will be a GET request, not a POST request. So the default is fine. And then we also get our data and parse that so that we have the real data here eventually with which we can work. Now, once we got that data, we want to use the data to set the actual comments which should be rendered here with help of comment list. So for that, we can manage another piece of state with use state, a list of comments where I have my comments and set comments to update them like this. And I want to set comments once I got them. So here in this then block, once we got a response, I'll set my comments. And in the API route, we send back an object with a comments key, which then contains this array of comments. So when we work with that data, I want to set comments equal to data.comments to access that array of comments, which is set in that response data package, which has this comments key, as we just saw. That then sets that comments state to those fetched comments. And that means that we can then use them to render them. So this comments state could then be passed to comment list, let's say through an items prop, like this. And now in comment list, we need to work with this items prop. And of course, you can name that prop differently. In there, I'm not expecting any props right now, but we should change this, add the props parameter, and extract items from props. And then we can use items to render these list items dynamically. So we just go through items and map every item into a list item with content like this. So cut this and add it here and get rid of these dummy list items down there. And then here add a key on every list item, which should be item.id. Here as a text, we want to output item.text. And for the address here, we want to output item.name, so the name of the user who wrote the comment. With that, we have our list items, which should be rendered, and we can now check whether that works. Let's reload this page for a single event and click on Show Comments. And we see the comments showing up there. And in the Network tab, we can also see the request there. If I hide the comments and I click show again, they are fetched again, and hence we see the request here and we see that it carries the comments in the response. I guess that's kind of obvious because we also render them successfully here, so it clearly works. And these are the core tasks which I gave you solved. We added the newsletter registration and now also this comments feature for storing comments, or for at least submitting the comments, I guess, and for fetching the dummy comments. Now, it's not very realistic yet, though, because we are only working with dummy data and we're not storing the submitted comment anywhere. Therefore, in a next step, let me show you an example of how we could talk to a real database to store our data there and to get our data from there.